I want to do a brief intro on kind of the difference between Premiere Pro and After Effects, and then just kind of show a few things to get you jumping into After Effects itself so you can kind of learn the real basics. So obviously Premiere is kind of more of a traditional video editor, and one way I like to think about it is that when you're editing in Premiere, you're editing horizontally, right? You're making videos that are 1 minute, 2 minute, 10 minute, 20 minutes, whatever it is, and you keep adding on to things in a horizontal fashion. Now, you can obviously build vertically a little bit, but the focus is kind of building out in a horizontal way. After Effects is not really designed for doing full out videos. Instead, it's for doing effects. So you might have like a scene in a video or just something little small that you want to add a whole bunch of really cool effects to. Well, that's what After Effects is for. And instead of building out those scenes horizontally, we typically build them out vertically. And you're going to get a whole bunch of layers kind of on top of one another that all control the different properties and what you actually see. So let's just jump right into it here. And you're going to, when you start up After Effects, you're going to get a little pop-up screen that shows kind of the latest options that are available in the new version. I'm just going to close that. I don't need to worry about that right now. Instead of you making a sequence, which is what we do in Premiere, we are going to create a composition. Okay, so I'm going to make a new project here, and then inside that project, I'm going to create a composition. So I'm going to go over here, and I'll go to New Project. And there's lots of little pop-ups, options, and stuff like that. Doesn't really matter. What I want to do is I want to make a new composition. I can either click here, or I can just right-click, choose New Composition, or I can click the New Composition button. Either one's fine. So I'm just going to click in there, make a new composition. Now, just like in Premiere, when we make a sequence, we have to give it a size. So After Effects is pretty good. It's just kind of setting up the default. So this is great. 1920 by 1080. I'm going to keep it at 30 frames a second, or well, 2997 is fine. And you actually give it a duration too. So 30 seconds is a great default. I'm going to make a black background. So these settings are great. I'm just going to keep those. Okay, so now I have a 30-second composition in which I can start building stuff. And like I said, you kind of build it in a vertical manner. Okay, so let's just start by just, I don't know, taking the text tool and typing my name. So I'm just going to put Radford here. I'm going to hit Control A to select it all. And then over here in the window, these are all your different kind of options. They're going to pop up, right? So I've got a properties option, which is already open right over here. I could also go to the character option, which has another way that I could get into managing my text, but I don't know. I'm just going to, in the properties menu here, I'll just use a nice thick font, something like this. I'm going to increase the size of it. I can also go over to my select tool and grab my handles, and might have to hold down Shift to kind of make sure I'm proportionately scaling it. Just something like that, right? In fact, I might even make that just nice, easy, 150. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to talk about how to actually access properties now. But just before I do that, I want you to think about the word parts. Sorry, I'm just going to switch this around really quick here. Slideshow, make that onto my primary monitor. Okay, so when I think about After Effects, and I think about putting in anything, right? An image, a video, a picture, an animation, anything. When I drop it in, I have 5 default properties that every single object will have. And if you remember the word parts, it's a nice, easy way to remember what they are. So, for example, when I go to the P, and I could even press P, it'll activate my position where it exists on screen. A is anchor point. We will get into that eventually. I'm not going to worry about it too much right now. R is rotation. Okay, so how I rotate it. T is transparency or opacity. And S is scale. So we use the parts of After Effects to kind of remember the basic settings. Now there's way more effects we can add on that, but that's the basics. So let's jump back to After Effects here and have a look. So this is Radford, right? Over here, this is my layers. I've got one layer. And I'm just going to open up the properties. Now this is a text object, so there actually are some text properties, which we'll eventually jump into. But for the transform, now they're not in the order of parts, and technically opacity is an O, not a T, but if I remember, there's my position, my anchor point, my rotation, my transparency or opacity, and my scale. And the reason I showed you that is that if I just click P, it'll jump right to position. And if I go A, anchor point, R, rotation, T, transparency, and S, scale. If I don't want to just remember what to type, I can just use these little flyouts here and it'll show me everything. So any value that is blue here is an editable property to change the appearance of this object. So for example, the position. I can move the position around like that, okay? I can scale up and down like that. I can rotate like that. Just gonna hit undo, and I can adjust the transparency. So those are my properties. And just like in Premiere, we can actually edit those properties to make them animate over time, and that's called keyframing. So this little kind of stopwatch is our keyframe. So if at the start of this clip, I wanted the opacity to be at 0, I'm gonna activate animation there. And you see I get that little keyframe, and then maybe, I don't know, at 2 seconds, I want it to come in. I'll just take that back up to 100, and it fades in. Okay, so very, very simple right there. We've done that in Premiere before. Likewise with motion. Let's say that, I don't know, at the 2 second mark, I want the position to be right where it is. So I'm gonna activate the position. But then at the start, I want it to be, I don't know, off screen. I'm gonna drag it. I'm gonna change that value. Now I could also use my shape tool or my move tool, and I could move it anywhere I want. You can see it has a little connector there to show the motion. So right there, now when I play that, it comes in. If I push these keyframes closer together, it just moves faster. Okay, so pretty basic there. So that's how you can kind of activate and animate things. So let's say at this point, after it comes in, I want it to then, I don't know, I'm going to activate my rotation, and I'm going to rotate it a full 360 degrees. Now what'll happen is it will, when I play it, comes in and flips around. Okay, so that's how I can get some basic movement, and I could do the rest for all these as well. Now, one thing you may notice, I'm just going to undo all these. When I have this, let's change that to 0. You'll notice that when I scale it, it's scaling from the bottom left. Okay, and if I rotate, it's rotating from the bottom left. That's the pivot point. Well, that's actually the anchor point. So the anchor point right here, you can move. And you can see if you adjust the anchor point never really moves. The text moves around it. Okay, which is okay, but what I actually prefer is that if I ever have to adjust the anchor point, what I like to do is I like to go up to this tool right here. It's called the pan behind, or the anchor point tool. You can press Y to access it or just click it. And when I use that tool, I can actually move this anywhere I want. So I'm gonna move that right to the center bottom, right about there. And now, and I'll go back to my move tool. And now when I scale it, I just think that looks a lot better. I can scale that a little bit nicer, right? And when I rotate it, it rotates around that point. So the anchor point's kind of an important one to think about when you're doing this stuff. And using that little Y key or using that tool there is a nice way to just move the anchor point. Okay, so let's get into some actual kind of simple effects now. I'm gonna delete that. I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna go to New. And I'm gonna make, and these are just some of the defaults, right? You can make like lights and cameras and stuff. I'm gonna make a solid. Very easy way to start. So I'm gonna make a solid, and I'm just gonna pick a random color. Doesn't matter at all. Let's just do a little, I don't know, purple kind of thing. There we go. So I've got this color. Now, technically this is a solid shape that is sitting on top of my composition. Well, where the power of After Effects comes in is in the Effects and Presets. So I'm going to click on Effects and Presets. And these are all the categories. Now, you can just, you can scroll through them, right? And just be like, oh, let's see. So audio, here's all my audio effects. Well, I can't do audio on this, obviously. Immersive video, perspective, and there's just all of these different options, and it gets kind of deep after a while. Like there's actually quite a lot, and you can download more. There's just so many things you can do, but it has an amazing search function. So that's how most people will use After Effects, is they just search for what they're looking for. So for example, one thing in Adobe is they have all these CC effects. And so all these CC effects you can apply onto an object and see what it will do to that. And again, you could put this on an image, you can put it on text, you could put it on a video, or in this case, you can put it on a solid. Not all of them will have any visual or visible effects. Sometimes you might do something and it doesn't really do anything. So you just have to play around. At this point, we're just messing around, that's all. So I just know that the CCs have some kind of cool things you can do. So let's try, for example, a CC snowfall. I'm gonna drag that on there. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but I've actually got some snow in there. Now, if I change the color of this purple, it might show up a little better. A way to do that is if you press Control Y, it brings up your solid settings, and I believe you can do that over here too, under Layer, Solid Settings. Let's change it to something a little darker, just because I think it'll show up nicer with the snow. Okay, so now what I have is snow falling. That looks kind of cool. Well, over here are the, I don't want to say infinite, but there's so many effects and properties that you can change. So right now there is 10,000 flakes. Well, if I increase that, I have, 134,000 flakes now. So that's a lot more. Okay, so maybe it's a little heavier snow is what you're looking for. The size, I can change the size of them, right? So it's a little heavier again. The variation is how big of a difference is there between the flakes from the smallest to the biggest. And so the bigger that value is, you'll get different sizes, okay? You can change the depth of the scene. And that just means that there's more snow kind of behind than there is in the front. I could add a little bit of wind. And as I increase that wind, you can see it starts falling that way. I could increase the speed of the snow. Maybe I want to decrease it, right? So it's kind of a really light snowfall with the wind pushing over to the right, okay? I can adjust the amount of wiggle that each of these flakes have, right? So as I increase the frequency and the amount, now I'm almost getting to the point where it doesn't even look like snow anymore, right? But I'm getting this kind of cool effect. So this is just one thing. Now that CC snowfall, I'm going to delete the CC snowfall effect. Just try, I don't know, try one other one here. Let's try bubbles. So if I put bubbles on there, it actually takes the background color away. I'm going to hit Control Y and make this a lighter color again. I think it'll show up nicer. Oh, whoops. Let's get rid of that. Let's go to the CC bubbles. There we go. So I got these bubbles now. So the bubbles go up. Okay. I can increase the number of bubbles. There we go. I can increase the speed of the bubbles. Maybe you're trying to get like a, I don't know, little bubbles in a drink effect going. Okay. Maybe I want to adjust how much they bobble around, or the wobble frequency. I can adjust the size. In fact, I can even go into the reflection type and change all these things where, now I've got that look. Okay. And if I want to slow down that speed, I can. And in some cases, you can actually make negative values. So now I've got them falling down. Okay. But you can see, just because it's called CC bubbles doesn't necessarily mean you need to use it for bubbles. You may be wanting to do something where you're wanting to simulate, I don't know, molecules in a, in a system. So make that really low, increase the amount of bubbles, increase their amplitude. And you can see, you can get some really neat kind of effects in there. And they just go on, okay, and get rid of the CC bubbles. So the idea here is that I want you to just mess around a little bit. Play around with some of the different CC effects. You can put them on text, it might work. You can put them on a video, put them on a picture, and there's just all sorts, right? You get into, eventually you can get into particle systems where you're actually generating randomly computer-generated images, right? And so this right here is a particle system, and the particle right now is a line, but I could change it to a sphere, and it just spits it out, or I don't know, there's kind of those bubbles again, and you can change everything from how fast they disappear, which is the death rate, to how fast they appear, the size of them. the producer. I mean, it's almost unlimited, the amount of options that you have. Okay, so it really is just a matter of messing around and knowing where the settings are, because there's a million tutorials out there that you can follow when you're trying to do something really specific in After Effects, or sometimes you just find some cool things that you want to play around with. So yeah, at this point, I just want you to play. Try a few things, see what kind of things are out there, what can you make, what can you do some cool things, and then the next step will be to pick up our next project, which likely will be kinetic typography.